everyone. Let's get ready to start. Go ahead and unmute your mics and then you can go ahead and begin.
Okay, so start now?
Yep, you can start now.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Ramona Machan, and I'm a steering committee member of Trauma-Informed LA and an advisor for the USC's NASW Unit. It is my pleasure to welcome all of those joining us this evening to the IPV Revolution, Healing the Healer. I would like to recognize Wendy Martinez, who is a USC MSW intern with Trauma-Informed LA, who has been the event lead and tech guru to make tonight's event reach even more audiences on more than one platform, and co-created an interactive platform for community engagement. As we get started, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the original stewards of the land where our event takes place today, here in Los Angeles. The NASW at USC acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva people as the traditional land caretakers of the Tovangar, which today is the Los Angeles Basin and Channel Islands. We are committed to uplifting the names of these lands and community members from these nations who reside alongside us. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Cecily Davalos, MSW student at the USC Suzanne DeWerg Peck School of Social Work and board member of the NASW USC Unit.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. NASW USC Unit is local yet it expands across the country and is part of the largest association of professional social workers. It runs with the mission to create bridges of connectivity between students, social workers, faculty, and alumni, as well as our surrounding communities and beyond that. The NASW USC Unit's primary goal is to advance and enhance the professional development of its members, the USC Suzanne DeWerg Peck School of Social Work students, alumni, faculty, and staff, through networking, knowledge, and resource sharing opportunities. Tonight, we hope to highlight our overarching purpose of collaboration with the intention of leading with integrity, challenging social injustices, advancing social policies, and enhancing professional growth. Our unit continues to move forward with our goals to support our NASW USC family despite the unprecedented times we are in. For example, our advocacy and policy team created brochures with each proposition broken down to help educate the community when thinking about voting. These brochures were translated in Spanish, English, and Chinese. The brochures will also be available in the virtual resource room after the event if anyone is interested. Our Trojans events team is in the process of planning and executing support sessions for the USC community to hold space for those who would like to discuss their feelings and what they are experiencing as a forum to help process their emotions and thoughts. Our social and relational events team will soon be hosting monthly movie nights to build community and allow for some kind of social interaction. So if you have a free Friday evening, come join us. Although it has been difficult to execute these ideas virtually, we are social workers, so we adapt to being flexible in a changing world. And lastly, I want to leave you with this as social workers. Social justice is a core principle of social work. We want to remind everyone to exercise your participation in the decision making for all people, including the ones we serve, by voting on or before Election Day, November 3rd. If you need state-specific requirements, you can locate them at the website www.rockthevote.org. So please use your voice to challenge these social injustices and go out to vote. Thank you all so much for your support that you have given us thus far. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cecily. And thank you to NASW's USC's Unit and Suzanne DeWerg Peck School of Social Work, Trauma-Informed LA, RSVP, Repair, Rainbow Services, Somos Familia Valle for supporting and sponsoring this event. And a final thank you to all of those joining us live stream and YouTube Live from around the world as we continue to battle these unprecedented times this year. This is our 4th annual event focusing on intimate partner violence, also known as IPV. As part of our series, we look at IPV through the lens of intersectionality and our multiple social identities. The past 3 IPV events explored the intersections of IPV in areas such as the military, girls and gangs, AIDS, within the LGBT+ community, among Black girls, and incarceration. This year, we will be discussing the intersections within IPV as it relates to COVID, communities of colors, and the healers. Before we start our program, we want to share a few housekeeping items with you. There will be more information about these and other events, as well as other information from the organizations collaborating to bring you our program tonight. Our virtual resources and virtual store will be sent out after tonight's event. Since we are live streaming this year, it also means that we are videotaping tonight's presentation. Please feel free to use the chat room to express acknowledgement of what will be said tonight. Happy faces, thumbs up, and snaps, etc. Please do not keep, please, I'm sorry, please do not, please do keep the chat room nonviolent. We will be using the chat box for our Q&A session as well. So Malala Yousafzai said, I raise my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which provides an opportunity to shed light on the issue of IPV and work toward ways to prevent it. Domestic Violence Awareness Month originated from the Day of Unity, first held in October 1981 and created by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The Day of Unity became a week focused on the main themes of mourning those who have died due to domestic violence, celebrating and honoring survivors, and building a community of those working to put an end to domestic violence. We like to take this time to validate the emotional reality that is IPV. For the many who have known IPV, it is common to experience feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. Truthfully, this form of violence is a disease. It has the power to isolate us from the world around us. On average, domestic violence hotlines in the United States receive more than 20,000 calls on a daily basis. But IPV affects more than 12 million people each year. Although our physical and emotional scars may take years to heal, these marks serve as reminders that we must dismantle systems that perpetuate abuse and hate and create community solutions. Reports have increased as much as 50% during this pandemic. And although some restrictions have been lifted, many shelters remain closed or operating at reduced capacity, which creates challenges for people who need alternative housing arrangements. Safety plans have become survival plans, as shelters have become impacted due to COVID. This pandemic has reinforced important truths. Inequities related to social determinants of health are magnified during a crisis, and sheltering in place does not inflict equivalent hardship on all people. Stay-at-home orders essential to slowing the spread of the virus, coupled with economic and health stressors caused by the pandemic, have forced DV survivors already at risk of domestic abuse into more vulnerable and dangerous positions. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience IPV, and that violence can take various forms, whether it be physical, emotional, sexual, or psychological. People of all races, cultures, genders, sexual orientations, socioeconomic classes, and religions experience IPV. However, such violence has a disproportionate effect on communities of color, the LGBT community, and other marginalized groups. Women, particularly Native American, trans women, undocumented immigrant women, and other women of color, as well as LGBTQ individuals and people with diverse abilities, are continuing to experience higher rates of IPV compared with the general population. Essential workers have increased risk due to vicarious trauma and anxiety due to increased workload and the increase in violence. This is compounded by their own trauma experience due to COVID and current societal conditions. There's a long stream of blood that stains like generational and historical trauma. We as a community must continue to build brave spaces such as this and advocate for our loved ones affected by trauma and those doing the work to dismantle it. There are many reasons why we choose to work in the revolution to end IPV. But regardless of these reasons, we know this work can take a toll on our minds and bodies, especially during this pandemic and social revolution. Advocates bear witness to so many powerful moments that deeply impact our lives, so we must keep in mind the impact it has on them. Navigating systems of oppression, institutionalized racism, intolerance, stress, triggers, all while staying hopeful to help the communities we serve. We must provide space to lean on each other and create a collective community of healing. So on behalf of the NASW at USC and TILA, I want to acknowledge that whether you're here as a person with lived experience, a professional in the field, a student learner, a dedicated practitioner, an advocate, an activist, an ally, or all of the above, we hope that this can be a night that unites us all in the fight against IPV. Our hope is that this revolution plants the seeds of liberation and ignites the transformative power within all of us. Now I'd like to introduce Susie Hess, co-founder of Trauma-Informed LA and founding member of the NASW USC Unit. Susie Hess.
Thank you, Ramona. So if you haven't heard of Trauma-Informed LA, we are an all-volunteer grassroots organization founded in 2014. And TILA's mission is to foster resilient communities that promote healing and well-being through collaboration, education, and community engagement. So we actually started off as 10 social justice activists on a rainy day in LA in 2014. And now there have been over 3,000 folks who have participated. So I wanna highlight our new podcast, Our Stories Matter, which celebrates the complex lived experiences of activists and healers through storytelling. Our Stories Matter centers on healing through activism, film, art, music, breath, and movement. And each guest brings a unique story, but one with the global theme of community healing and liberation through storytelling, which is a lot of what we'll be doing today. And I want to encourage you to check out Unchained Scholars, which is a USC student interest group. And they're students who were formerly incarcerated and are getting their master's in social work, and they're pretty amazing. As journalist Lauren Giller profoundly states, the power of the story will save us all. So I would like to also introduce one of our sponsors, RSVP from USC, and Corey Brappy-Rudd from RSVP will talk more about the services and the supports that they will be providing today and also in the future as a resource.
Hi everyone, my name is Corey. I'm an advocate from USC's RSVP Relationship and Sexual Violence Prevention and Services Department, and we provide crisis intervention, trauma-informed therapy, and advocacy services to USC students who have been harmed by any type of gender-based violence. So we're advisors and support persons for student complaints to Title IX. We also, we can participate in hearings and interviews, and we also conduct, primary prevention and outreach services as well. So we do a lot of the workshops that are, we do a lot of the affirmative consent workshops for all incoming students, undergrads, and we do a lot of bystander intervention trainings to help students fully understand what consent means. We also are here to provide assistance tonight for anyone who might feel triggered or uncomfortable during the panel. And you can please send either a message to me or Tiffany Chem, and I think some of the other speakers will also provide you information with how to reach out to us directly. But you can feel free to give us a call at 213-740-9355. And there are going to be chat moderators who can try to help set you up with an advocate. If you do feel triggered, you can absolutely get in touch with us, and we can try to provide crisis intervention services and any type of support you might need. And if you're joining us through YouTube Live, please let the chat room moderator, Maria Gates, know you would like to speak to a safe person, and we can set you up with that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Corey. We're happy to have you and Tiffany here with us tonight. My name is Vashti Bacher. I'm a DSW student here at USC's School of Social Work, and also a board member of NASW USC. It is my pleasure to tell you a little bit more of our moderator tonight. Ramona Mershon is a compassionate leader with over 20 years of experience in public service as a trainer, coach, advocate, and leader. As a doctoral candidate at USC, she channels her passion to develop innovative ways to support vulnerable and marginalized communities. Her current role is in helping to create community and cross-sector partnerships that raise awareness of equity, disproportionality, and disparity for children of color in child welfare. Ramona is a licensed clinical social worker and continues to use her skills to assist in achieving authentic community care opportunities. Ramona continues to use her education and experience to promote equity in the Black community. She also has lectured and trained on various topics in the areas of child welfare, racial equity, leadership, and trauma. Please help me welcome Ramona Mershon.
Thank you, Vashi. Thank you so much. I'm honored to join you tonight and to be representing both TILA and the NASW USC unit. So now, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. I'd like to introduce you to tonight's brave panelists. Orchid Cameron is a yoga practitioner and a teacher who leads healing-centered and trauma-conscious yoga practices. Overcoming a childhood lacking in health set her on a journey to study the human body's self-healing ability through healing foods, exercise, subtle energy healing, and setting strong boundaries emotionally, physically, and energetically. Paula Miley is a registered associate marriage and family therapist working out of Pasadena and Encino, and believes in cutting through the clutter and getting to what's real. Paula's approach is one of authenticity, which means working with candor and compassion in every session. Nkem Ndefu, and please forgive me if I said your name wrong, is the founder of Lumis Transforms and creator of the Resilience Toolkit. He's known for her unique ability to connect with people of all types by holding powerful healing spaces, weaving complex concepts into accessible narratives, and creating synergistic and collaborative learning communities that nourish people's innate capacity for healing, wellness, and connection. Patty Ramirez is a transnational social worker and project-based consultant committed to advancing collective healing and social justice-oriented and advocacy organizations and movements. Patty has dedicated her work to working with immigrant victims of crimes and justice-impacted folks. And Patty is also about to earn her doctorate here from USC. Welcome to our panelists, and let's get started. So the first question I have for you all is, what is your why for doing this work?
You want me to start?
Sure, Orchid.
Sure. So for me, I had so much chronic pain as a child, and it just really lowered the quality of my life. And so my why is I want to try to end pain as many people as possible, which is basically impossible to end everyone's pain. But just for example, if somebody has like lower back pain, I'll know I'll know the right stretches to fix that. So it's hard for me to like hold that in. I'll just be like, let me help you with that. You have a problem, let me help you. So I do a lot of systems to help as many people as possible. So my why is I am very dedicated person to healing myself, and it's like an itch. I have to help everybody else around me.
Thank you, Orchid. And Kim, tell us about your why.
We need to get free.
Absolutely.
There's so much suffering, and my recognition that trauma is really unique in that it's not just the suffering that traumatized those of us who've been traumatized. I don't know who's escaped that as part of being on this planet. It's our own suffering, but we then inflict that on the people around us. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial in that I believe that those of us who are survivors of trauma, we always become perpetrators. It's just, do we perpetrate on others or ourselves?
Oh, that's true.
Okay. And so how to break that cycle, because also traumatized people create traumatized organizations and traumatized systems and traumatized. So it just keeps circling. So how do we insert ourselves and break that, right? And get free. So that's my why.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Miss Paula.
See, that's perfect because it just like leapfrog right over to me, because that's exactly my why. It's when you get into that space of realizing how lonely your own suffering is, and there's this glimmer of love that arises, and you feel that like really distinct grace and gift of not perpetrating and kind of continuing to choose the reenactments. When I feel that love, it's like this overwhelming appreciation that then brings in wanting to share that. And it's rooted in such a deep, profound love for all of us that if I have this and you don't, then naturally there's an imbalance. And so just exactly what Kim said, where it's liberation. And your idea of freedom might be different, but we're all going in the same direction to be free. So it motivates me. Thank you. And I got licensed, yay.
Yay! Congratulations! We got some good vibes going on here.
Yes, thank you all.
So, my sister Patty, tell us about your why.
Yeah, I mean, throughout my work in trauma-informed and healing justice work, I think one quote that has really touched me profoundly is the idea that pain that is not transformed is transferred. And so, and Kim spoke about this, we all already kind of got at this, right? We see individually and collectively the reenactment of unhealed trauma. And even healing spaces are not free from trauma. And so that's my why, because I've experienced firsthand as someone who has provided direct services, as someone who has experienced my own trauma and carried the wounds of intergenerational trauma. And I've experienced the disembodiment that came with that. And so part of my why was really coming back home to myself and understanding that my role is to transmute pain, oppression, and trauma into healing. And I can only do that for myself. And I can also hold space for others to connect to their self-healing magic.
Wow, that's how we create those brave spaces, right, ladies? We have a powerful female panel tonight. So we have all of this, female energy. So that leads us to our next question. How do you see the community healing around IPV as political? And Kim, I see your eyes lighting up. You want to answer?
Politics at its heart has to do, I mean, we're facing an election, so we think of politics at that level, electoral politics. But politics at its heart has to do with power. And IPV has to do with power. Who has power who exercises power in abusive and violent ways, who is culturally supported to use power in certain abusive ways. And so it's political, right? It's political in how services to support, right, the survivors and people living in situations of IPV, how those are funded. That's political. What are media representations of violence? That's political. It's all political.
Right. Particularly when it comes to gender-based violence in regards to the societal norm of how that's perpetrated, and you see it just all over the place. And Orchid, I see you're just anxious to answer this question, so I'm going to go to you next.
Well, I have so much to say about it. Yeah, so I feel like I always have known about inequality. Like, I felt like every day of college felt like there is no Santa. Like every day of college, I'm like, oh, our country is built on racism and sexism. I had no idea till college. So I knew that. I had like this low level of knowing that. But until I experienced, being raped by a rich white guy, I had no idea how much inequality there really is. Like, I had to really experience this, I was just I'm just a yoga teacher having a nice life, right? And then this happened to me, and he had so much more money than me. He had 3 criminal defense attorneys, and all I could do was get like 30 yoga students and friends to testify on my behalf. And it was very much a David and Goliath situation, that he could just spend money and he can just, get all the skilled people on his side because of money, And then for me, I just had to gather all my little people to be like, no, Orchid's, so it's just like, the inequality was very much highlighted by this. And I had no idea what people who experienced domestic violence went through until I experienced it recently. So I didn't know I was not going to be able to work for 2 years. I had no idea I'd just not be able to work anymore. I had no idea. It's robbed every area of my life. So physically, I had a lot of pain. Emotionally, I had a lot of pain. Financially, it ruined me. And I used to be like a workaholic, and now I can't work. So it's been like a whole identity crisis. And so it really opened my eyes to how many people that experience domestic violence may not have the support system I have. Like I have hundreds of yoga students, and I have so many people who care about me. And that gave me a lot of resources as far as like how to get a nonprofit lawyer. So I just wonder how hard it is for people who aren't college educated or don't have the resources I have to deal with what I dealt with. I just feel like until there was like an abuse of power, I didn't really see how much power I didn't have built in the system. So it's definitely political.
You as a healer, Orchid, I mean, you're saying how this is impacting you in your journey, and you are actually a person that people go to who are survivors, right? So as a healer, for you to be impacted by that, that's definitely a different space you're having to navigate. That's very
and it's a little bit, I'm laughing a little. I'm a stand-up comic as well, so like it's a little bit funny to me that like this is not what I want to be known for. I don't want to be the girl who got raped or the girl who was in court for a year and a half getting a restraining order, but I am known as that. And so I got a call at 4 a.m. one time, and it was a person who couldn't complete a sentence, and I could tell, okay, she got raped. Like, it's like she didn't have to explain anything to me. I'm like, she can't string a sentence together. This is a highly educated person. So I'm just like, okay, give me your address. I'll take you to UCLA Rape Treatment Center now. So in a way, because I've been open about what happened to me, lots of people do come to me, and I'm able to help. I've been able to help people have a much better experience than I had. Every step of the way was really hard for me. So it's painful to be a pioneer. It's painful to be a pioneer, but I'm so happy to have that knowledge not be useless. It feels really good to be able to help other people with having a better experience than me.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for being brave, and thank you for sharing with us. Patty, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah. I mean, I see the act of healing, and especially the act of healing in community, as inherently political, because by definition, it's an act of resistance. I think we are in a society where we've, inherited the legacy of structural racism and other intersecting oppressions. And what we see is that it's meant to strip us of our community, of collectivism, of collective healing, and it's meant to put the burden on us as individuals to take care of ourselves. And to be honest, I think that when we heal in community, we are no longer isolated. And that's one of the tactics of abuse, right? In whether you talk about sexual violence or domestic violence, these are some of the tactics that those who experience violence and those who cause it, because, I forgot who mentioned this, but hurt people do hurt people as well. And we are more than the harm that we endure and cause. And so when we heal in community, it's kind of acknowledging the both and those truths. We no longer have to deny that, some of us may show up in spaces and perpetuate abuse, right? I'm such a quote person because I want to leave everyone with this. And I use this for my brand, Wild Luna Botanicals, which is a self-care and wellness brand. Audre Lorde, again, said it best: caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And so that's what I think, for me, anchors community healing as political resistance.
Wow, powerful words. You'll hear them later on again, Patty. Paula, let's wrap this question up with you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was so powerful, Patty. Thank you so much. And the second I hear political, I think of kind of infrastructures, and I think of the tolerance that's built into the fabric of our system based on all these years of oppressive ideas and who gets care and who doesn't. And we see that so right now happening with our communities of color, just kind of being left out, the homeless population and those that aren't receiving services. And so when I look at it, I see kind of the commandeering of even what survivorship looks like, and how right now we're disrupting all of the ideas that we've taken for granted. This has given us this time to kind of squeeze in and appreciate in a different way with a different nuance that community. and to experience the power of that beyond these structures who have kind of abandoned, so often right now, so many people that are in need. So I see the politics really shoring up and now propelling us to understand a power in a different way. And there's this opportunity to redefine power and redefine healing and the labels of what that means.
Right. It's the perfect storm. We haven't had a time such as this, right? A time where everything's coming together for us to really be able to catapult and use this moment in time to really move things forward. So we know a lot of things have been going on. We talked about the global pandemic and a revolution. So thinking about the healers who are healing, how has your healing shifted as we are in this global pandemic and revolution? And I'll start with you, Patty, since I keep, leaving you to the words the end.
No, I mean, this is such a good question. It has definitely shifted, and there's been both. The caveat is that it's both negative and positive. And I hate, using those binary terms to frame my experience, but because of the pandemic, I definitely did not have the same access to nature like I had before. Being in LA, I'm in the city. So for me, I had to go to hiking like in San Gabriel or in other places that are a little bit farther, which now, because of safer at home measures, and I've had really close family members who have become COVID positive and who have been impacted. And so for me, it was extremely critical to honor social distancing. And so that's the negative piece, right? Because I don't have the same access to nature. I could walk, but I'm just afraid of getting COVID, and I'm also immunocompromised. So all of those elements, right? But the second thing that happened, which I think is so positive, is that it really forced me to sit with myself. Something that I kept finding distractions to avoid, right? And that's part of every healing journey. I feel, I've had a therapist this whole year since I moved back to LA, and I remember she would tell me, Patty, like, you can be my therapist, right? I'm a trained social worker. And she's like, you could do the same thing. Like, why do you keep paying others and going outside of yourself? You have the power to heal yourself. And that's something that I've been able to really dive deep in during this pandemic. I have no choice to sit with my shadows, to tend to my triggers, and to hold my wound.
In London doing a training, and we had to flip it online. So there is something about for longer work, when we're doing not short sessions, but longer work, we have to shift how we do that a little bit.
Right.
That took some work, but I've worked steady. I have not worked under 40 hours a week this entire time, which, I can't say, it's both, and sometimes like 60, 70 and more. So I'm very grateful for it, because I know that's not the reality for a lot of people. And I would really like a vacation.
I know it's funny, but
my bones a vacation.
As healers, we don't always take our own advice. Like, it's so easy for me to say, like I was telling Orchid earlier, I walk every day now. It's a new thing that I've been doing for my own self-care. And, I have my own trauma. So I notice where I jump if the, tree moves, or if there's a dog that barks, and I see these dogs every day. So I have to even tell myself, as a therapist, like, Ramona, that dog is behind a gate. Nothing's going to happen to you. So I've literally had to start to train myself and to use my own advice and my own practices to kind of teach myself, and then just setting boundaries. And like we were talking a little bit before we started about how we have to set boundaries for ourselves, because we are healers, we are helpers, and we're always trying to help other people. And then we never take time to really set space to help ourselves. So I'm going to ask you this question, Paula, about how has it shifted for you during this revolution and global pandemic?
I feel like it was like a double whammy for me with this whole like revolutionary reckoning that's happening. As a mixed race person who's so light skinned, I feel like race was always so sensitive for me. Like, I have to self-identify and kind of let people know. And all of my family is significantly darker. So like, for me, that was already kind of sensitive as far as where's my place. And I think that was a lot of the work that I held on to on an individual basis, and people and encounters and people not knowing and how.
I think Paula is frozen for a second. Hopefully she'll get back. Well, hopefully while we're waiting for her, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next question, and then we're going to circle back to that. But I'm going to ask you guys, what are some practices, best practices for you to avoid re-traumatizing yourself by doing this work? I kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you can answer that, what are some best practices for you to avoid re-traumatizing yourself and others while doing this work? Patty, would you like to? Oh, and Kim. Okay, go ahead.
To me, one of the biggest things is if we're not in our people have I think a very mistaken understanding of empathy. When someone says they're an empath, they're like, oh, I feel everybody's things. In fact, often what happens is when we're not in our bodies, we don't have a sense of where we start and stop and what our own boundaries are. And physically, neurologically, our brain doesn't register because we're not embodied. And in that case, when we see other people suffering, we see that it feels like it's coming into us because we can't feel our bodies. And so people say, I'm an empath. And in fact, that's not empathy. That's not having a boundary. Right. So the ability to me, the best prevention for vicarious trauma is to embody, to be able to feel your body. And here's the catch. For those of us who have a lot of trauma, coming into our bodies is like, whoa, there's a lot here. This is really uncomfortable. So we're not in our bodies, then we experience other people's stuff. So it's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So a slow, safe embodiment practice to gently come into your body will decrease how you're re-traumatized in the work. Both other people's trauma entering you, and because you've gently embodied and done work on your own primary trauma, you're less likely to be triggered, to have a primary trauma trigger happen in doing the work.
So can you share a little bit about what that looks like? Kind of explain the process of how would someone start to go through that process to have an embodied experience, to understand the process of doing that?
I think many people will, so I'm going to give an example. It's a school that for pregnant and parenting teens, most of them having experienced IPV, in one way, shape, or form since they were small. And they thought, oh, we're going to do some trauma-informed things. We're going to do some embodiment. We're going to bring in yoga, and we're going to bring in mindfulness. And the girls stopped coming to school. Wow. Because there was so much charge in their body. If you just drop somebody in without support, there's a reason we're disconnected. That's a safety mechanism that's automatic for our bodies. And so safe embodiment means often quite slow. There's a lot of choice involved. So slowly dipping in, and perhaps, for example, if it's too much to go inside, you might start by connecting your senses externally. What do I hear? What do I feel on the surface of my skin? What do I see? And that's not inside, but we're starting to get closer. And can I tolerate that? Or when I start hearing things, do I become activated? So starting really slow and gently. Often when we practice, people say, close your eyes. Maybe closing your eyes doesn't feel so safe if you're hypervigilant.
Right.
Keep the eyes open and being able to just notice something perhaps positive in the body, a sensation that's positive. Starting there instead of what do you notice inside of yourself? And you're like, anxiety and tension and all of these things. If you can say, that feels good, that's a safer place to start. So those kinds of practices promote safe embodiment.
And just recognizing that, and also just asking permission. And oftentimes, even when Orchid does our trauma conscious yoga, it's about, if this feels good to you or if you feel safe, it's always important to ask permission for people, or people to ask permission of themselves, to experience some of those practices. Patty, I know you were shaking your head. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with all of that. I think one best practice that I lead with this for my own healing, to avoid re-traumatization. It's acknowledging my humanity and acknowledging that it's okay to make mistakes, even if we are, showing up as the person who will be holding space for someone else and for someone else's healing experience. It's okay to experience a trigger. And I have actually taken the Intro to Resilience toolkit that NCAM developed. And what I want to do is, it's okay to have those triggers, but it's all about learning the tools and skill sets about how you can own holding your trigger, right? Regulating yourself, so that you're able to show up in the most embodied self that you can. But then also acknowledging that part of my humanity is that healing is messy. It's not meant to be comfortable. In fact, it's in the discomfort where growth happens. And so some of the best practices start with just having the ability to sit with that, sitting with that discomfort. And what does that look like and feel like and sound like? And what are those textures like? So I feel like, that piece along with storytelling, because, I often connect with people in the social justice field and lead with my story and lead with, the story that I too am someone who has experienced and caused harm. And it's so quick for us to go into the details, which is so re-traumatizing to ourselves and others. And so figuring out how to make storytelling safer for us and for others means maybe we don't recount the details, but maybe what we do is we really sit with, well, where did I feel that in my body, right? What was that temperature like when I feel anger? And is there a place in my body that feels a little bit more neutral? I feel like that's what Kim, even talked about in terms of starting with those slow, safe embodiment practices. You don't have to be from 0 to 100. You can start like, someone cut me off. Where did I feel that in my body? Just starting with baby steps.
Yeah, being aware. I think just being aware of yourself. And it's really hard for many of us to stay present in the work. And, as you navigate life, or if you're experiencing some of these practices, you really have to work and be intentional about staying present. And maybe it's something like, what do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear in your environment to know that you're there in the present, rather than taking yourself back to maybe something that may be traumatizing or triggering for you? Orchid, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, so I have a 5-year-old, and this is just like a little demonstration. So I have a tea kettle, like an electric tea kettle that plugs into the wall, and it's glass, right? And so my 5-year-old, I had to explain to her, like, don't block the doorway. So even though my 5-year-old's only like 2.5 feet tall, when she would block the doorway with her arms, I would get triggered by that. And so the way I explained it to her is I let her step on a little step stool and watch the electric tea kettle. So I press the button, and then I'm like, see, do you see any bubbles yet? And I let it all the way bubble up. And then once it was all the way bubbled, I turned it off. And I showed her how the bubbles slowly come back down. And I said to her, like, are the bubbles gone yet? Are they gone yet? And I'm like, hey, now that the bubbles are gone, is the water cold enough to touch yet? So I just kind of explained that process of, once it's up, there has to be some time to go down. So I explained to her, like, when you block the doorway, I know you're not going to hurt me in my mind, but my body is still responding like I'm in danger. And so I explained to her, when I go up, I need some space to cool that off. So I plan on being triggered. So I just I don't judge myself. I have my weighted blanket and my pillows all ready for me to go lay down in the fetal position until the bubbles are gone, right? And explaining that to my daughter helps her not feel rejected by me. So I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong. You're not in trouble, but mommy just needs to go lay down on her side right now. And so it helps me to not take the time to judge myself or beat myself up. So I'm prepared to be triggered. And then at the same time, the bigger triggers, bigger than just a 5-year-old blocking a doorway, I just ask myself, do I have time to sleep this off? so like for example, my bedroom, I couldn't look at my curtains for a long time, so I just took them out of the bedroom. And then when I was like, you know what, I'm gonna clean my room and put my curtains back up, I have 3 days to sleep this off. So I reintroduce triggering things slowly if I know I have the time to not have to, go to a job interview or something like that. That's another reason why the pandemic's been great for me. I have time to kind of diffuse those triggers and get my body used to it and have my nervous system kind of reset and get used to things that are, like you said, Ramona, not actually harmful. There's nothing wrong with my curtains. I am not being assaulted right now. So it's kind of like helping myself get used to things again. So I just, like you said, I know my triggers, but it's more like, what are ones I can kind of sand down and what are ones I just have to avoid? Is this a good day for it?
Right. Like what narratives are we telling ourselves, and what are we listening to in regards to what we're telling ourselves, right? So Miss Paula, if you can answer that question, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry about the internet just drop out. It was like, it was so good. I love that this common language exists across all of us regarding resilience. So I just want to say thank you for the Resilience Toolkit, because this gives us all this common language to organize and kind of make sense of what's happening through it all, what's happening in this healing. And when people understand it and they feel empowered enough to be embodied, I see what's happening in my body. Now I have a way to explain it. It's not just happening in my head. It's so liberating. And I like for all of us to know this and to share it so freely and have my family members talk about it so normally. It's not a big expensive thing. It's something that we can all co-share throughout our communities. Like it fills me up. And so I just needed to acknowledge with gratitude for that. But when I have a best practice, it really is rhythm, right? Like all of our work is just vibe and rhythm. We come into this world having been connected to a rhythm. Then we get into this first thing that's ours, which is our body. And at some point there's a rupture, but that body's still yours. It always has been. And getting back into the rhythm of it in the healing profession myself, what's my before plan? What's my rhythm before? Can I sit with the moment and say, my best efforts, my wanting to accompany someone on their journey is just that. It's an accompaniment. I have a limitation inherent. Here's my beginning rhythm. I'm activated. This story has my stomach churning. I need to breathe, ground, drop in, stay present. But here's my regulating while I'm working. And then afterwards, a very intentional time in my week where I just bawl, where my heart just breaks. And if I can't bring it up, I'm going to sit tend to notice where, and just cry. Like there's nothing so much more healing as a healer than to say you are worth being in touch with your own pain and the pain that isn't yours that you're still carrying. And can I let that flow like water? Can it just leave? So part of that rhythm, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I'm good. Now I'm back on my vibe. Now I'm back on this. And so I think when we approach the work with not an outcome in mind, and I can be present and I can stay in my vibe, then I'm always winning. And I'm never overwhelmed. And the suffering is never too much, because that part of it, that part serves its purpose, and I'll never understand it. But I know where I'm at. I'm in the middle of my energy today and keep it going. So just highly recommend creating. And like I said, the same way I just talked about it, I'll come back to it. Like I'll even start just moving. Like all of a sudden people are like, okay, and I'll do it in therapy sessions too. What you doing? Like, I wanted to get a little pattern, a little beat. Like, you want to do it with me? And I think if anything with COVID, that has become more important in the work online, is to take more pauses, to take more intentional breaks, because the screens start to fatigue and the senses and so on. And so I'll pause more and check in more. So as we're doing this work, how are you doing? How's this going? Do you want to stand up and stretch together? Breathe together? Let's get back into the story and just normalize movement.
How does that feel?
yeah, I was going on a whole tangent, so thank y'all.
No, that's beautiful. So it kind of takes us into the next question I have for you guys. And some of you have answered this a little bit, but what does it mean really to address trauma through either the Resilience Toolkit, mindfulness, trauma conscious yoga, indigenous practices as a healer? We know Patty's into, a whole nother thing I want her to talk about, but what does it mean to address trauma as a healer and an activist in this work? So I want to hear a little bit about some of your expertise in this area. So, and Kim, you want to talk about the Resilience Toolkit a little bit? Oh, Orchid, you want to go first? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I have these little videos online that are super short. Just like if you can't sleep, I have a little 3-minute video you can watch and do a breathing meditation. Or if you're feeling sleepy during the day and you want to wake up, I have a little 3-minute meditation on that as well. And so I just have like this, like a menu of what's your problem? Here's the breath for it, right? And sometimes I forget to use it. I'm like, oh yeah, I have little meditations I could use. And I think still the biggest thing for me, like action step wise, is having really good positive affirmations. So I have a physical list that I printed up of all the people I can call when I'm having a hard time. So it's on my wall, physical list, because when I'm in a bad trauma, when I'm in the sunken place, like I can't think clearly. And so to have a black and white thing about, oh yeah, that's a friend I forgot I had, I will call him or her. Action steps, doing my meditation, doing affirmations, and just eating, sleeping, social time. Also, I spend a lot of time on my hair. Like that seems like not a big deal, but like I take the time to like feel beautiful. So it seems shallow that I took the time to put on a dress and a necklace and makeup and do my hair, but like I want to feel pretty, and that I don't have to only love myself if I'm pretty or not, but it does feel good. It's a way to tell myself I love myself, is to take care of my physical appearance and my health and all those things. So.
Thank you. And Cam?
One of my impetus around creating the Resilience Toolkit was recognizing as we started out about what's our why, is trauma, right? And how trauma, we've been very clear about all that trauma is and does, and I think we've only scratched the surface on that piece. But what I realized is that most people are actually not ready to talk about trauma. And if you ask them, they say, oh, I didn't have trauma. That's for other people. And it's not true, but what that means is when people are too busy surviving actual ongoing trauma of structural violence and oppression, of rape culture, of all these different, whether you're living with violence in your actual home or in your community, it's ongoing. And it's when we're too busy surviving, we can't say, I have trauma. We don't have the luxury and the space. And so I created the Resilience Toolkit really as a way to stabilize and resource people, to build that capacity for trauma healing, to build that capacity for transformation and change. So, and the analogy I frequently use is of drowning. When somebody is in the middle of trauma, they're drowning. There's a feeling of turbulence and chaos, and we don't walk up to somebody, see them drowning and say, swim deeper. We throw them a lifeline and we help them get to shore. And and so that is the idea, that's stabilization. And we sit with them while their lungs clear, right? And we're there for them and we support them. And then if they get knocked in the water again, we help them get out, and over until they know how to do that themselves. That's stabilization and that's resourcing. And so I see the Resilience Toolkit as helping people develop the self-awareness of their own states, of activation around, and I don't even use the word trauma with most people because they're like, again, not me. I just say stress, but trauma's in there.
Right.
And then how to settle. What are the tools to settle, and how to choose and know? Because there's a lot of things out there, but how do you know it works for you? Did anybody help you develop that knowledge base for yourself to know this works for me or this doesn't? And so that is a big piece of it. And so I see using the Resilience Toolkit as preparation for when you're ready. Now I'm ready to go into the narrative, the story, and also make change. Whether that means leaving an abusive situation, I now feel like I'm resourced enough that I can do that. So that's how I see it.
Can you tell me a little bit about the intersectionality between that resilience toolkit and the emotional emancipation circles, and how that impacts the anti-racism work we're doing right now in this social revolution in regards to healing trauma in communities of color?
So EECs are the emotional emancipation circles that were in mostly created by Dr. Cheryl Grills. And so Dr. Grills was they're in like 50 cities in the continent of Africa, in Europe, in the Caribbean, and North America. And she wasn't too happy with the mindfulness piece of it. And so she came through the resilience toolkit and then said, this is an approach that is flexible enough that it can be Afrocentric. Like different cultures can take it and pull it through their own philosophy or paradigm. And so she centered that, and what she's seen, she launched it in August of 2018 in that format. And what the trainers, the facilitators of the EECs now say is that people have the skills to recognize when things are too hot for them, so to say, and how to settle. And so they're not re-traumatized in the telling, and they're able to stay in the conversation. And we, with my organization, Lumos Transform, we do embodied anti-racism work, embodied trauma-informed work. Because I'm working right now with some executives and in a large system, and when we have a group of white people who, they care, they say, we want to do something that's anti-racism, but they just freeze up, shut down, are afraid to make a mistake. They can't even talk about race.
How white fragility, right?
How are you going to do policy if you don't have the embodied capacity to manage your own stress, to get in the conversation and stay in the conversation? And so the saying is, embodiment capacity sustains an anti-racism agenda. And really it sustains any anti-oppression agenda. If we cannot stay in our bodies, we can't do the work.
Right, you want to run, right? You want to dissociate because you don't want to face the reality or be accountable. So that takes us into Patty. You're kind of doing similar type of work, but for multiple types of communities and ethnicities. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah. So I also had the benefit and the pleasure of going through the Resilience Toolkit. And I did want to talk about that experience because I feel like the skills to regulate myself are critical, especially as I look to support others who come into the social justice field to combat the same systems that impacted them. And, I was having a conversation with a colleague who graduated from the USC's DSW program. Her name is Dr. Dayanara Marte. And she says, you cannot take your communities anywhere that you haven't been, right? And so for me, right now, part of my healing journey has been really leaning into my own ancestral healing practices that are rooted in indigenous, like curanderismo practices. That has been an experience in itself because I feel like when we reclaim, and I'll speak for myself, in the process of reclaiming my own ancestral knowledge, wisdom, practices, medicine, I cannot do that without acknowledging the grief and loss of that same knowledge, right? I inherited the legacy of colonialism, immigration, and all of the intergenerational trauma that happened that disconnected me from my lineage. And so part of my work, embracing curanderismo, being in a system that wasn't made for me, right? Academia, as a very proud Latinx, Salvadorian, Mexican, Angelino, right? For me, it's been really important to navigate this space as my whole self. And I think what the indigenous practices within curanderismo does is that it involves the concept of healing over that of coping, and from a lens of mind, body, heart, and spirit, right? When we are in survival, and this is, again, a conversation that I've been having with a lot of colleagues, you almost don't, you're experiencing physical, spiritual, mental, emotional deprivation, right? That experience, again, really makes it difficult for us to even be in conversations around social justice when we are often re-traumatized, again, by the systems we're looking to change. So for me to address trauma through these practices is to really take in healing. Healing myself, my community, and I have no control. Like I will say right now, I do not have the capacity to heal anyone except for myself. Anyone who tells you that they can heal you, please do not work with them. Please don't work with them, because that's not possible, right? Like, we only have 100% responsibility for ourselves. However, for me, healing through Indigenous practices, through social justice, through, the Resilience Toolkit, as a means to address trauma, has been, how can I then create the conditions to help others connect to their own self-healing? So I guess that's kind of a roundabout way of saying just how important it is to lean into healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the work, it needs to be intentional. So Paula, do you want to add any of your magic to this answer to this question?
Patty was going, and I was like, yes. I was like, let me out. We be talking about our moon circles and like just appreciating the earth. So thank you. Like, I was just like, yes, like wanting to move. And like that, I think that is what we've lost, is that trust and that wisdom, right? Like, and so as it got appropriated and kind of like then commodified and people making money on it, the trust of it actually working is like part of the work when you're kind of tending to the wounds. So if you are just surviving, if you are just coping, how do I trust myself, right? Because I'm so busy, I'm not noticing that I'm actually doing the thing that I can't do. And if we pause for a second and notice, this is impossible. How can anyone survive this? And I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. What part of me is knowing that I can do this? And so while we are kind of journeying a company, supporting, I love that, stabilizing, creating the fabric, stand on my shoulder, push you over the wall, whatever we got to do together, then it's bringing that spotlight to, and look at you. Look at you. You can trust that part. And so I think the intentional piece is, as we meet these parts deeply and we rewire and re-narrate what it means, your personal meaning, defining it, sharing it, growing, then is trust. And if we can kind of keep that piece throughout the healing part of it, then you'll look at me and go, why did I pay you any money to be my therapist? And that's how I know my job was done. Because it's like, you're right. You did that. So I think they're really like empowering trust. What part of you is knowing where to turn left and right? Did you notice that in that second? Really helps to just, dang, you can really do that. And by the time you're done, you'll be like holding the light for other people behind you. And that's the work.
Thank you. So ladies, we're to our last question before we take questions from the audience. But, let's talk about what are some action steps that our attendees or people watching this replay after can begin to take to develop their own healing practice. So what are some steps? Patty, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, start with one thing. I am guilty of this. I want to do everything and anything to heal, right? The reality is that we will not arrive to heal. That's just like, once we can make do with that idea, we can really embrace that it is a journey. And even as a process of elimination, starting with one practice and really giving yourself the opportunity to actually experience, out of curiosity, question it. Does it align with you? And even if you figure out that that practice doesn't work for you, at least now you know that, okay, that doesn't work for me. Like, I found that out myself. I still carry a lot of shame when I say that meditation, I cannot. I can't do it. I can't connect to it, and that's okay. right? Not every practice will be experienced differently. And so just sitting with how you feel with that, whatever practice it is, whether it's, every day I'm going to make my own tea because I'm learning about hierbitas, about herbs, and I'm going to just sit with myself for 5 minutes. That it's as simple as that. Finding something that works for you and really leaning to your intuition. We were taught to not trust ourselves. At least I was. And so for me, part of my healing is connecting to my intuition and honoring when my body tells me, you know what, that doesn't work. That's okay.
That's right. Listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
Kim, what are some steps?
I think everything that's been said here, there's so many, I think the realization is there's so many ways in. There's so many ways in. I think a way to evaluate for yourself is this asking, there's the day-to-day perspective, but there's also like rising up and looking at the long view. Is a lot of people think that when you do healing, it has to be like ripping off the Band-Aid or going in there and doing catharsis and like vomiting out your story. And in fact, that tends to worsen things, in fact, quite significantly. And so people think, oh, I'm gonna go to therapy, but I'm gonna be wrecked afterwards, as if that's a sign of you doing something good. And so looking at, is there more stabilization happening in your life as whatever path you choose? Is there more settling? Are the highs and lows more even, right? Do you feel more spaciousness? Do you feel more resourced? And it's actually when we feel most resourced, that's actually when we go and start excavating. That's the time to do it, not when things are like this.
Right.
And so whatever practice you choose, for people who are interested specifically in the Resilience Toolkit, since the second week of March, we've offered pretty much daily, I think just maybe a handful of days we haven't offered, a totally free 45-minute introduction, just to give you a perspective to evaluate however you choose to engage, how to start telling if things are working for you. So
that's beautiful. Thank you.
It's called anchoring resilience for turbulent times. So those are free and open. And if you work for an agency or an organization that doesn't have the budget to send staff, we're like, bring everybody, just come.
I love it. Especially those kind of resources. Miss Cameron, what are some steps people can begin to take?
Yeah, one of the things I do is I just, I make a list of all the things I wish I did as a kid, and then I just do them. So like, one of the really cool things about the global pandemic is that whatever you want in the world is now available online. So like whatever art classes I want to take, available online. If I want to, like I just bought myself adult tap shoes and got a little tap floor and watched a tap dancing video. I'm 40 years old. like usually people start when they're 6. But like I just try to do things to incorporate joy. I love what Nikem's saying is like, what are the stabilizing things? Like I do paintings about my experiences of DV and IPV. And the paintings, when people look at them, they just get it. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. And it's cathartic for the people who look at them without telling them the details of my experience. And so I like to, like a lot of people say healing isn't linear. And so it's just like, well, what sounds fun today? Let's do that. Like what the thing that's going to get me out of bed is the fun sounding thing, like the joyous thing, not the chores in an unfun way,
Or making things fun. One of the things I do with clients is something called art journaling. I was telling Susie about it because you can draw whatever you feel your experience is, and then you cover it up with art, whether it's old magazines, newspapers, whatever, and you make this collage of art, and you know what that means. But you've turned your trauma into something beautiful. And so it's something you can leave on your shelf. Anybody can see it, so.
I literally was watching a video on art journaling before this panel. Literally,
Wow.
I had to turn off my YouTube to come to this panel, and it was all about making a mandala and like writing my affirmations and painting over it. It's just like, yeah, just what is delicious and fun. I think that's the healing practice that you can start today.
Absolutely. So Paula, close us out with this last answer before we move on to our next segment.
The actionable steps. Well, I think like in our grind culture, this premium on always hustling, always doing something, be productive somehow. I'd say like letting go of that I gotta buy some time to afford some care. And, you know, just stepping into starting something. Like every moment that you choose that your sip of water is care. Your body doesn't, it's not like, oh, that's not $40, so therefore it's not really self-care. Everything throughout your day can be a stabilizing practice. Every small moment that you're driving or sitting or setting up your computer and you say, I can smell the foggy fall coming. That's my self-care. So this delaying of the sensation that we can be well until something else happens magically sends me to therapy. Therapy's not the only route. Start now. Realize you can give that to yourself any moment, and those action steps will naturally lead you to whatever the next modality is that fits for you.
That's beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you so much to our amazing panelists, wonderful panelists, for sharing your experiences, your knowledge, and your fierce insights. The COVID-19 pandemic has put a spotlight on numerous ongoing public health crises, especially violence within our home. As state mandates relax and people begin to live a new version of normal, allies cannot stop addressing the layers of social inequities in our communities and the ways in which they impact vulnerable populations and essential workers' emotional health. The pandemic has highlighted how much work needs to be done to ensure that people who experience IPV can continue to obtain access to support and services. If you or somebody you know has experienced intimate partner violence, call the free confidential National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. Again, 1-800-799-7233. The hotline is free, confidential, and available 24/7. We rise by lifting others. So let's take the time to lift those who are helping communities impacted by intimate partner violence. And now I'm going to turn it over to our lovely Orchid Cameron, and she's going to lead us in a breathing exercise before we start our Q&A. Orchid?
Hi. So get in a comfortable position, and whatever that is, that might be on the edge of your chair, that might be in the back of your chair. Just check it out and see what feels good. I'm gonna sit in the middle of my chair and I'm gonna relax my spine up. I'm not gonna tense up. I'm gonna relax it up. And you're the authority on your body. I'm here to help guide you, but you're the authority on your body. So feel where your feet are on the ground and breathe in and out your nose. You have the option to keep your eyes open if that feels good. You have the option to keep your eyes closed if that feels good. And I'm going to count the breaths. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep breathing. Notice the air on your skin. Notice where your body touches your chair. Notice the sounds in the room. I hear the ticking of my clock. I hear the buzzing of my fridge. Just notice everything around you. All those things are spiritual. Everything is just as spiritual as anything else. The sound of a gong can relax you, or the sound of a truck going by can relax you if you decide so. So keep breathing. Having a slightly longer exhale turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. Having a slightly longer inhale turns on the fight or flight. Generally, we want to turn on the parasympathetic rest and digest. Keep breathing. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And then take the dominant hand, and you're going to place your thumb on the closest nostril, and you're going to inhale through the empty nostril. And then you're going to switch sides, close that nostril with the forefinger, exhale where the thumb was. Hands the same, inhale through that nostril. And switch sides, exhale through the empty nostril. Inhale through the empty nostril. Switch sides, exhale. Inhale. Switch sides, exhale. Inhale. Switch the fingers, exhale. Inhale. Switch sides, exhale. Inhale. Switch sides, exhale. And then go back to, relax the hand down, go back to breathing. Inhale. And exhale. So the alternate nostril breathing is a yoga breathing exercise. If you are in a situation where you're up right before bed and you want to fall asleep, just plug the right nostril and breathe in and out the left nostril. If you're at work and it's 3 p.m. and you're getting a little sleepy, do the opposite. Plug the left nostril and breathe in and out the right nostril, and just set a timer for 3 minutes. So I don't know how you guys feel. Do you feel a little bit more calm? Do you feel a little more in your body? I do. The alternate nostril breathing is to balance the right and left side of your brain. Some people use it to get rid of migraines or just to feel a little more balanced. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Orchid. That was so beautiful. And I had the pleasure of experiencing that with you with our trauma conscious yoga. So I appreciated experiencing that again. So we're going to get into the Q&A. And the first question they have for you is, where would you recommend receiving an anti-oppressive education for this work for aspiring social workers, healers, and activists? Who would like to answer that?
I do individual short bite-sized videos about what to say to domestic violence victims or sexual assault victims. What are the things to and not to say? So it's just kind of like an action step, like checklist, like this is why you might say this over this. So my videos are, you can follow me on Instagram at Orchid Cameron. And I also have a website as well as a Patreon to do, I have short videos to help. But I would like to take Nick Kem's Resilience Toolkit. I would like to sign up for hers too.
They're asking for the link, so I just asked her for it so we can put it in the chat. Yeah, there's so many things online right now because of the revolution that's going on. So many different tools, and there's a racial equity toolkit website and a bunch of different other websites that have numerous, I think we even have a link on our website, as a matter of fact, at Trauma Informed LA for anti-racist resources. So I know that they could put that link in the chat as well. Let's see, do we have any other questions so far? Is there a link for Dr. Grill's emotional emancipation circles? And I know there is a link for that. I've also taken her training, Dr. Grill's training. That was before they incorporated the Resilience Toolkit. Now I feel like I need to be retrained. Let's see here. Oh, it says here, my normal anxiety reducing practices are not working. So what else can we do?
I'm happy to answer. Generally, what I found, part of what's made this hard is that people's typical coping mechanisms or stress reduction mechanisms were taken away by the pandemic. Patty talked about the access to nature, for example, or if socializing with people is something that helps settle you, that's gone. Exercise at the gym, that's gone. So a lot of things that people do, which really, and then all the more quiet and self-reflective time, people are like, wow, can't outrun my anxiety. I can't outrun it. It's here. And so what are the kinds of, how I developed the toolkit was working with people who can't go on a retreat, who had the money, you're working. You don't have the money or the time or the space to go on a retreat. You need something you can do in real life, in real time. And so, being able to recognize, as Paula said, anything can be settling, anything can be regulating or healing. It's your ability to have the awareness of the impact it's having on you. So somebody might, for example, scroll Instagram in a way that they're checking out. You can watch them just start to just check out. While somebody else might scroll Instagram and perhaps see a quote and resonate with that, and it's inspiring them. I love one thing on Instagram. I like to watch people throw pottery. When I watch them throw pottery, I can
like Greece, like when they do it in Greece and they break things.
Not for me, not breaking. It's the making or watching the sensory.
Oh, okay.
Throw like in the wheel. I meant.
Yes.
The other thing is sometimes I'll do a search for children yawning.